Hey, VMUG members, thanks for joining us for the virtual event that you're watching a community session I have on the other side of the Chicago. It's not necessarily. I can't say on the other side of the world. We're pretty local. Nate, you're on the bad side of the Illinois Wisconsin border. I'll let people figure out which part that is. Nate is actually a former coworker of mine. You guys know that I spent a short stint at VMware. Nate is probably one of the most social guys at within VMware. He's an SE. I'll get him a chance to introduce himself in a moment. But this session is about you, about how do you make a transition in your career, whether you're in IT now and looking to go into a new role within IT, or you're a brand new VMUG member and you're wondering how do you penetrate this market of IT and get access to what's frankly a pretty sweet career. So we'll start off by getting introduced to our guests. Nate, go ahead and introduce yourself to the VMUG audience as if anybody outside of the Milwaukee area needs introduction. The Milwaukee VMUG members know you well.
My name's Nate Hudson. I'm a senior solutions engineer at VMware. I've been here a little over 3.5 years. Member of the CTO Ambassadors Organization, also a member of the Veterans at VMware internal group. Happy to be here, Keith.
You know what? I'm super excited for this conversation because you went from doing something completely not IT related to kind of, I have to say, being a member of the OCTO organization, the Office of the CTO Ambassador Program, is probably the height of, beyond being a principal engineer at VMware. It's probably the height of kind of your profession. You're making a name for yourself personally, but it is a if you've heard of the V Expert program, because you're also a V Expert, right?
Correct. This is my
So
fourth year now.
yeah,
So
so outside of just the V Expert program, like within, if you think of the V Expert program, the the Octo program is the cream de la creme of people inside of VMware, out in the community, evangelizing, not just evangelizing VMware products, but helping people really understand and learn the product. So you've gone from a hands-on type of role in the U.S. Army, and we'll get into that, up to Octo in VMworld land. Let's talk about kind of where you started out your career in general, your non-IT career in the U.S. Army. What was your job? What was your job in the Army, and how long were you in the Army?
well, I'm going to back up just a little bit as well. So a lot of people don't know this, but I'm also a violinist.
Ah,
I
did not know that.
actually went to University of Wisconsin Eau Claire for about 3 years as a music major, focusing on the education side, not so much the performance side. And I got into my senior year of college there and realized this is not what I want to do for a living. I enjoyed playing music. I don't know if I could actually teach kids music and make that a viable career. So, believe it or not, I dropped out. I never got a degree. I had probably an associate's degree at the time from the university, but I didn't get my bachelor's degree from the university. Worked a couple different odd jobs for a while trying to make ends meet. Eventually, I went into the Army. Was in the Army for a little over 8 years. Was a combat engineer. Combat engineer has to do a little bit around, basically obstacle clearing or obstacle barricade moving, also being able to provide transportation type services for the infantry. So if you think about things in a nutshell, build bridges, blow bridges up, blow obstacles up, clear the path for the infantry. So that's what I did for about 5.5 years while I was in the Army. The last couple years that I was in, once you get to become a sergeant or an E5 in the military, you have to kind of pick a choice from a career advancement standpoint to either go in to the drill sergeant school and become a drill sergeant for a couple of years, or the other option is to become an Army recruiter. So I chose the Army recruiter path, which took me to the Milwaukee land area. So during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, I was in Milwaukee trying to put people into the Army.
So, where did you live before you moved to the Milwaukee area?
I followed my wife to Madison,
Mm-hmm.
but before that, I lived in Eau Claire. Eau Claire was my hometown. My dad was a university professor, retired from University of Wisconsin Eau Claire as a professor of music there, and my mother also was a music professional, but she did it more in the Catholic high school and church arena in town. So,
So people who are not from the Wisconsin area, they kind of view Wisconsin as just one big Milwaukee. And the Milwaukee is obviously the biggest city, but Madison, to go from Madison to Milwaukee is kind of a big deal. That's not like moving down the street. They're not even. I would argue that they're not even convenient to one another. So it's a pretty big move. So I say that to establish you kind of have this attitude that this it seems that you have this go anywhere type of attitude. Is that fair to say?
well, I do. I don't know if my wife has the go anywhere type of attitude, but I've always kind of been that way. That where the excitement is, I will follow if I can. So, yeah, it wasn't a big leap for me. I was excited to take on a new role, and the Army moved me from Madison to Milwaukee at the time. So I had no complaints. It was an opportunity for me to be able to kind of up my career. Obviously, my wife was a nurse, so she really had no problem finding work wherever we went. Very seasoned labor and delivery nurse at the time, so
All right.
we were
So
ready. We were ready for a change.
that sounds good. So I do have a question around building and blowing up bridges. So when you come to a bridge, which comes first? The look at it saying, okay, how do I destroy this bridge, or how was this bridge built? Which one comes to mind first?
Well, I'm also a motorcyclist, so I always look at a bridge and say, is that bridge going to weave in the wind as I drive across it, like the Golden Gate Bridge? But I still, in the back of my mind, I have things that go into my head, like hey, what type of footing does that bridge have? Is it an expansion bridge? What's the truss structure? What's the I-beam structure? Like, hey, if I had to blow that bridge up, where would I strategically place the explosives in order to drop that bridge into the water?
That
So
is that is both fascinating and horrifying at the same time, Nate. That every time I meet you in person now, I'm going to be wondering, what is he trying to blow the bridge up, or is he trying to figure out how he would build it? That's I will never forget that now. So let's talk about life after the service. What did you do after the service? I mean, you went from someone who works with their hands to, and even within the service, it's interesting because you went from you're out in the field, you're actively working with your hands, you're engineering whether the solution is deconstruct a bridge or build a bridge. You're active physical laborer and engineer. You go into a role where you're kind of you're pretty much white collar a little bit when it comes to service. You go from uh, blue collar worker to a office knowledge worker. How was that? Let's talk about that transition a little bit. How was that transition even within the service? Did that something was that something that just came naturally, or was it a tough kind of switch in mindset?
for me, I guess I've always been kind of a social guy, so for me, it wasn't hard to kind of get back into living in a city atmosphere. I hadn't been away for that long. Um, I think the hardest part was because I was recruiting during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. I had some good friends of mine that were actually over in Saudi Arabia that were actively involved in combat, and I got
Mm.
to see a lot of them come back. I myself, honestly, I was never in any type of a hand to hand combat type of a situation. Never on the front lines. All the training I did was to prepare for that type of a situation, and then came on recruiting duty, and my entire battalion got shipped overseas, and I didn't. So I felt a little bit rejected in a sense, where I had fellow coworkers that were over there, and I was back in Milwaukee. Um, I will say that recruiting duty in the Army was probably the hardest sales job that you can imagine. So if you think
Especially during a
about,
conflict, I would imagine.
yeah, I mean, if you think about like trying to put somebody into the Army during an active time of war, there's not a lot of people that are willing to go and volunteer. And because the Army was an all volunteer Army, you literally had to go out and like sell, a student or a college, student and or their family on the benefits of joining the military at this time. So I'll be honest, it was right after my wife and I had gotten married. I was probably working 80 to 90 hours a week as an Army recruiter during that time frame.
Wow.
So it did put a big stress on our marriage. But we worked through it. I was still successful as a recruiter. I was still able to meet my mission. Mission meaning putting X number of people in the military into the Army, per month. In fact, the last 9 months that I was on recruiting duty, I got somewhat of a promotion. They moved me into the downtown Milwaukee Federal Building, and I worked down there as a vehicle fleet master. That's actually where I got my itch for technology. They had an electronic engraving machine
Hmm.
that they used to be able to engrave all the plaques and awards and stuff like that, and nobody could seem to figure out how to get this thing to work. So I started playing around with it. It literally ran off of a 5-inch floppy. That was the program that ran on it, but I figured out how to make it work, and that was like kind of my first itch into the technology space. So it was a lot of fun. But as all things changed. The military was also going through a downsizing effort
Hmm.
at that particular time. So they merged our battalion headquarters with Minneapolis and Chicago, and I had two choices. I could either keep the job that I was doing, move to Minneapolis, and continue doing that, or I could get out. And my wife and I had just moved from Madison to Milwaukee. My wife has roots in the Milwaukee area. She's got family and friends that are here. So I made the hard decision to get out. And of course, when I got out, what do you do when you get out of the Army? I
That's
don't
a
have a
good.
college degree. I work these weird, odd jobs like, cleaning the butcher shop and grocery stores, stocking shelves at night, working in an auto body shop as a body shop manager. Friend of mine that was in the military also said, "Hey, why don't you go sign up and take the postal exam? Maybe you can jump in and become a letter carrier, because the prior service military guys get to go to the top of the list."
Right.
So I did. Like literally the day after I got out of the Army, I went down to the post office in downtown Milwaukee. I took the postal exam, and about 6 months later, they came knocking on my door and said, "Hey, do you want a job to be a letter carrier?" So I did that for about 5 years. Worked as a letter carrier for 5 years. Loved the job. Great exercise. I actually didn't have to work out. I could go to work every day, walk 8 to 10 miles, carrying a 50-pound satchel, and I never had to go to the gym. My wife still jokes around about how one summer I decided to get a haircut like you, Keith.
Uh huh.
And at the time, she said that I looked like I may have had cancer, because I naturally have a little bit of dark circles under my eyes, and with no hair, it kind of like really emphasized that fact. But I
So
was about 170 pounds, didn't have to work out. Great job, very social job, being able to talk to your customers on the road every day. But it wasn't a very mentally fulfilling job. I will put it that way. And some things happened when I was in the post office that made me realize this is not where I want to work for the rest of my life and retire. So that's when I made the hard decision. My wife and I made the hard decision that I was going to go back to school and get a degree in IT. And the IT thing really was the thing that kind of came back to me from when I was in the Army all that time. Even when I was working as a letter carrier, I'd went and picked up a couple computers. I was tinkering in my basement. My wife couldn't get me out of the basement because playing with this new stuff, right?
So let's pause here for a second. So
Yeah,
I hear a lot of origin stories about, because we're not far in age at all, but I hear a lot of origin stories around us. You're a Gen Xer, so a Gen Xer origin story usually starts with, oh, my dad bought me a Commodore C64, and I was kind of into programming as a kid. That doesn't sound exactly like your story. It sounds like you caught the bug near the end of your service in the Army, and then you picked up from there a few years later.
that's a fair statement. Yeah,
Yeah, so I think it's the if folks follow kind of the Twitterati, the kind of the IT folks that are on Twitter. We're kind of in a bubble because all of us have very similar stories, and what I thought was very interesting for you to share with the VMUG audience, what you just did was that you don't necessarily come from that cookie cutter background of fifth, sixth, seventh grade. You got into computers. You took a much more traditional route. The fact that you were a music major is a new one to me. And then I think the other point that I wanted to make sure I made during this conversation is that you didn't actually get a degree. So one of the great things about IT now, and I still believe it today, I didn't have a degree when I first got into IT, and many of my coworkers didn't have a IT, and IT has proved to be a much better than middle class salary way to earn money for your family. That's typically much more reachable than a lot of other professions that make this money. I just wanted to make that kind of that anchor that this portion of the conversation on that you didn't have, this isn't Nate Hudson the superhero who had this amazing background in technology early in age. This is someone who up to this point worked a typical career in the U.S. Armed Forces. Then you went in and worked a typical middle class career in the post office, and we're picking up the story from there. So you guys decide at this point in life to make a big. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, I don't want to. I don't want people to miss the point. You had an established career that people work their entire lives. That like literally my oldest son's dream is now changed, but his dream was to become a mailman, be a mailman his whole life, and retire. So you had like a typical middle class career. You could support your family fairly well, but you guys made this decision. Let's talk about that process. Like what? Because I have this conversation with my wife all the time. How
sure.
did the topic? How did you guys broach that topic?
So I'll be honest, and you hear people throw out the phrase of, oh man, that guy went postal, right? So
Yes.
I'm not gonna go into some of the horror stories of me working as a letter carrier. The last couple of years that I actually worked as a union steward in our office, and there were some things that happened that made me realize that this just was not a long-term career opportunity to continue.
So
Um,
some people can have the mentality to do that their entire lives and be fine. This wasn't the case for you.
no, right? I realized at that point that in order for me to what's the phrase? If you can't get up into work, if you can't get up and go to work in the morning, or if you love your job so much, you'll never work a day in your life. Like
Right.
that type of theme or methodology. I was at that point where I can't do this, right? Like I was dreading getting up and going to work every day. My wife was just the opposite. She was getting up, going into the hospital, delivering babies, right?
I,
She loves babies, loves
how
kids,
how
right?
do you not like that job?
Right. So she was living life. I was really struggling. I think she recognized that, and um, I will make the story as short as I can. But I had a grandparent that passed away out in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
I asked for time off, like PTO, to go to the funeral, and I was denied.
Oh,
and I was denied being able to go to the funeral because of some legalese information in our contract at the time. It had to be a mother, father, sister, brother that was defined as direct family that you'd be able to allow to have family bereavement time.
right.
Um, Needless to say, I still went to the funeral. I still
Good on
went.
you.
I still went to the funeral. I left. I was away from work for an entire week. My job was threatened. I came back. I had a very good doctor's excuse, I will put it that way, that allowed me not to lose my job. But while I was out in North Dakota, that's where I took some time and did some. That was my serious soul searching moment, right? Like I need to seriously figure out whether or not this is the right path for me to continue as a career or not. Came back. I had a really good talk with my wife. She decided that she would go back to work full time, and in order to allow me to quit my job and go back to school, and pursue a degree, right? And so at the time, I was digging through applying to Marquette and Milwaukee School of Engineering and UWM, the local big kind of three colleges, and um, I made the decision at that point that the IT itch was there, right?
Right.
So I was like, I got to try to get into a program that where they have an IT degree program. Milwaukee School of Engineering had an adult education program for a degree in management systems. I got them all my details. Turns out about 75% of my credits from my former days at UW Eau Claire actually transferred. So 2 years later, I graduated from the Milwaukee School of Engineering with a degree in management systems.
So what?
Um,
Help me out. What year was this?
that would have been about 1998.
Okay.
So I
So
went
this is
went
the
back.
height of the Y2K
Yep.
and the job market's
Yeah.
super hot.
Yep. Yep. It was very interesting. I was kind of sweating bullets at the time. Like I was in school. I'm like, I'm taking these Microsoft courses on the side. I had two kids. My wife's back to school. I'm thinking, is this the right thing? Like with all this Y2K hype that's going on, like what happens if I graduate and I can't get a job in IT? Like I was really nervous. Um, come to find out, my academic advisor at Milwaukee School of Engineering had a son that worked at the Harley Davidson Product Development Center, and he had suggested, "Hey, it's your last year at MSOE. Why don't you get yourself in and see if you can, get yourself like as in an internship position? I'll talk to my son, see if they can get you in there." Sure enough, that happened. So I ended up getting a job my last year in college at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, Product Development Center. Ironically, they're one of my customers right now. So I've come full circle, I will say. And yeah, I mean, I remember walking in there the second day and, keep this under wraps. Um, but let's say they were doing some creative reverse engineering with a other motorcycle product line because this was the product development center. I think it's safe for me to say now that I actually saw the V Rod before the V Rod was even like out there on the market. They had a V Rod on the floor. It's been a long time, so and the V Rod is out now, so I can share that. That's not a risk. But this was like, wow, like I'm in a real IT job here now. I had a great mentor there that mentored me for the whole year. Graduated from Milwaukee School of Engineering, May of 2001. Um, got a job 30 days later at Rockwell Automation. And 30 days after that, I had my third child.
Wow. It's a eventful period of life. Let's peel back. I think some things that are helpful for people. So Nate, let's contrast the bookends because we can kind of fast forward to where you're at now. We can see that path. We've heard that path even on the last in the last VMware virtual event. We had a couple of folks from the TAM type organization talk about their journey to becoming a TAM within VMware. So from a customer to a VMware employee, we've heard that story. But what we don't hear often is these stories where, you practically had a 13, 14, maybe 15-year career, roughly 15-year career after high school, or actually after your first stint at college, before you got into IT. And the
You're dating me now. Be
yeah,
careful.
I hate, I apologize for I did say we're Gen Xers, so
All right.
that's a big enough range.
Fair statement.
The but you went through a whole career, a couple of different careers before you landed on IT. You chose to go back to school and get your IT, a degree in IT. Looking back, is this something that you could have done without going back to school?
Boy, that's a hard question. I mean, I always talk about how when I went to school at UW Eau Claire, if they actually had like an IT degree program, even at that time, I don't know if I would have had the bug for that because like the only experience I had was like back in the early 80s. I took like an MS DOS programming class in high school,
Right.
and that did not give me the bug, right?
No, it
Not
didn't.
not an
That's
itch.
those weren't fun classes.
No, no, right? So I would say it would have been a lot harder for me to get into the IT space without me going back to school. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm only saying that because I didn't have 15 years of experience behind me already in IT. So when I went back to school and I got my IT degree, and even after I got to Rockwell Automation for my first real IT job, I felt like I'm still 15 years behind everybody else. I
Mm.
busted my butt. I got my MCP, my MCSA, my MCSE in Windows 2000, 2003, 2008. I even took it as far as getting my MCITP. I ended up, becoming a team lead on our desktop support team, eventually moving into a role where I was supporting our entire executive staff over in the US Bank building. Um, then I took on a position at Rockwell doing Altiris work for our global support team. So I was on a team that managed our entire Altiris environment across the globe. But that's like some of the stuff I felt like I had to do in order to play catch up because
Hmm.
all my peers probably were doing this for 15 years already. They had a 15-year head start in IT. So I really had to find a way of being able to do that. And I felt, at least for me, I wouldn't have been taken seriously getting into IT had I not gone back to school and at least gotten an IT degree. Here's this adult education student. He's applying for a job at Rockwell Automation. He's in his early 30s and he doesn't even have an IT degree. Why should we hire him? Like, what's he been doing for the last 15 years? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's where I was
I
at.
know exactly what you mean. I have friends who started their IT career in their early 30s, and I'm starting to realize that this growth mindset. If you guys ever want to read something really great, there's a book or a concept on growth mindset. The idea that you either there's this concept in certain industries that you either have it or you don't. And IT can be one of those things where people feel like, well, you either have the aptitude for IT or you don't. And it's really, if you don't have if your mind doesn't quite work that way, you probably can't get into IT. And I had that mindset for until about 8 or 9 years ago. I've been in IT for 20 plus years. And when I had a friend who wanted to get into IT, and I talked to him, and he just wasn't getting it. And I wanted to say, you know what? I'll change the name. I said, Bobby, you're a great guy. This is what I wanted to say, but this is not something that's coming naturally to you, and you should probably look at doing something else. But he was really dedicated, and I didn't want to crush his dreams, so I kept mentoring him. And today, he's a desktop support guy doing really, really well. He just fought through it and got to a point where that he could do it. And this is in his case in his late 30s that he made the transition. So it is absolutely possible. But I think you make a valid point that whether you call it imposter syndrome or just, even today, I didn't start out IT with a degree, so I even struggle from the concept of being less than, even today with being in IT for 20 years. So I want to encourage the folks listening out at whether you're no point, no matter what point you are in your career, it's not uncommon to feel this way. I mean, you're talking to the CTO advisor and Nate, who's a member of Octo. That these guys. I mean, you were sharing with me. You get to talk to the people who write vSphere, and you get to give them input on the product. And this is someone that delivered mail for a living just a few short years ago. So it is it's extremely possible to achieve what from the outside seems the unachievable. So, I really enjoy hearing your story. So Nate, any last advice you want to give the VMUG users or members?
I would say that if you're as passionate about technology as you and I are, um, start a blog, get on social media, go to user group events, learn as much as you can outside of your normal day-to-day job, because, and I also give you some advice, and this is advice that I got from my academic advisor at the Milwaukee School of Engineering. He said, if you're going to go into IT, don't stay in one place too long. In fact, I would suggest that you move to something like every 5 years, or you're going to get yourself into a position where you're stuck in a stagnant role or a stagnant career position. If you go and you look me up on LinkedIn and you look and see, you'll see that I haven't stayed in a role or at a company for more than 5 years. I think 5 was my max. That was both at the post office, but that was before I went into IT. But even I worked at West Bend Mutual Insurance Company. I was there for 5 years, and at that point, I kind of hit a roadblock where I couldn't move up or move laterally within the organization, and that's where I had to again make a career change to try to find another path to kind of, up my game and move myself up within the career space. So I would say that's a good words of wisdom from my academic advisor even to this day. You don't want to be the guy that, at 50 some years old that is still doing, DB2 code programming when DB2 might not be around too much longer. I'm just going to say, or you don't want to be that COBOL guy, because I don't know if there's that many people that are still programming in COBOL. You don't want to position yourself into a role that might become obsolete. So you always have to find ways of keeping yourself relevant within the industry. And how do you do that? Learn new stuff, become members of user groups like the VMUG community if you're a virtualization guy, or if you're a VMware passionate lover of technology. Start up a blog. Believe it or not, people will listen to what you have to say, even though you don't think they do. So
Always
you will
been
get
one of the
feedback from all
surprises
sorts
in
of
my
different gamuts of
blogging
people.
career is
Yeah, yeah.
when someone who I have the utmost respect for comes and say, "Hey Keith, I read that piece you wrote," and I'm like, "Oh, you're one of the five," and the one of the five is someone on the product team, and I'm thinking, "Wow, that's amazing." So, Nate, I really appreciate you taking out the time. For those of you who would like to follow Nate on Twitter or on social media, how do they get a hold of you? On, because you're obviously passionate about community. How do people in the community connect with you?
Well, you won't see me publicly doing a lot of stuff on Facebook unless you're a political person. I don't use that platform very often from a technology standpoint. But LinkedIn and Twitter, I'm at great. So that's kind of a weird Twitter handle, but
You know,
it's
you broke up there. Our technology is starting to fail us again. What was that Twitter handle?
Great Natron. So
Okay.
that is an homage back to a grade school teacher that gave me a nickname way back when, Natron, and then I had a college professor that used to call me Great Nate. So I took the two and merged them together. So
All right. And if you guys want to follow me, I'm at CTO Advisor on Twitter. And also, don't look me up on Facebook unless you just really want to get into a political debate. And that doesn't do us any good. And then LinkedIn, I'm pretty busy on the LinkedIn, so you can Google me on LinkedIn or search for me on LinkedIn, Keith Townsend. Until the next VMUG virtual event, we'll do another community session. You can definitely follow Nick's great work. He also blogs, so you can find the blog on his Twitter profile. We'll talk to you next VMUG virtual event. Thanks a lot.